They called it a restructuring. But for her, it was a sentence. A young ER nurse, 3 years of saving lives, cut loose as a nationwide economic crisis slashed hospital budgets across America. She walked out of the building with only one thing left, her conscience. And then, on a cold, crowded freeway, while hundreds of cars sped past without slowing, she stopped. A man had collapsed. She rushed in, started CPR, fought for his life until paramedics arrived. But minutes later, a witness pointed at her. It was her. I saw her. She was right there when he fell. Police closed in. Cameras rolled. And the woman who just saved a man's life was escorted into custody. Preliminary charge, intentional infliction of serious bodily harm. But what they didn't know was, that man wasn't just anyone. And she hadn't just saved a life. She'd touched something far bigger than she could ever imagine.
Welcome to TNM Incredible Story. Let's uncover what really happened.
When Julia Harper, 27, stepped out the back entrance of San Vista Hospital at exactly 5:17 p.m., the sky wasn't raining, but it hung heavy, as if waiting to fall. Winter in San Diego wasn't supposed to feel this cold, but the clouds above were thick, heavy, almost personal. A registered nurse who had spent the last 3 years on night shifts in the ER. Julia had believed she was indispensable, until today. In her hand was a plain white envelope, sealed hastily, no logo, no thank you note. Just one printed sheet of paper. Termination notice, position eliminated due to budget cuts. No farewell. No flowers. No one walked her out. After 3 years of night shifts in the ER. All Julia got was a silent nod from HR and a phrase she'd heard too many times in the last few weeks. We're sorry. It's not your fault. We're forced to downsize another 40%. Not her fault. Then why did it feel like the world had just declared she didn't matter? Her 2004 Toyota Corolla sat in the far corner of the parking lot, under a leafless tree like an abandoned thought. She opened the door, threw the envelope onto the passenger seat, like tossing away a part of herself. She didn't turn on the engine. She just sat there. The only sound was the whisper of wind through cracked windows, and a banking alert on her phone. Your balance is now below $75. She turned it off. Her lips tightened. Her eyes didn't tear up, not because she didn't want to cry, but because she didn't have the strength anymore. The tiny room she rented would expire in 5 days. Her landlord had already called 3 times this week. No job. No insurance. No callbacks on the dozen applications she'd sent out. She used to believe that nursing was recession-proof. But as the economy buckled and federal healthcare grants collapsed under spending cuts, even those who saved lives were left with none to save them. She turned the key. The car groaned awake. The gas light blinked red. She drove, not toward home, but just somewhere. As if motion might quiet the weight in her chest. On I-805, traffic roared past like a river with no memory. Car horns. Blinking ads, a billboard for free career counseling, hovered above her like mockery. And then, she saw it. A man, standing by the edge of the freeway, slightly slumped forward. He wore a faded military jacket, olive green, frayed at the sleeves, with dust gathered in the seams. Something felt wrong. Within seconds. He collapsed, his body folding to the pavement like a fallen tree. No one stopped. Cars swerved around him like he was road debris. No time to think. No hesitation. Julia swerved to the shoulder. Slammed the door open, and ran. Cold air sliced her face. She dropped to her knees beside the man, fingers seeking his pulse. Her ear near his chest, and her own heart skipped a beat when she realized. His breathing was shallow. His heartbeat, irregular. He was dying. She didn't wait for permission. Didn't care who was watching. Because if no one else would save him, she had to. Chapter 2, Holding On to a Heartbeat. The smell of burnt rubber and asphalt filled the air. Horns blared from cars that barely slowed as they swerved past. Somewhere nearby, someone shouted. But all Julia could hear was the silence between the man's fading breaths. She was kneeling, hands trembling over his chest. He was in his early 60s, salt and pepper hair, deep brown skin. His lips were pale. His military jacket bore a peeling name tag she couldn't read. She leaned closer. No response. She checked his pulse, barely there. His airway seemed partially blocked. No gloves. No mask. No medical kit. She did what she knew. One hand tilting his head back. The other lifting his chin to open his airway. "Sir, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can." Nothing. She laced her fingers, squared her shoulders, and began chest compressions, each one precise, practiced, powerful. Her training kicked in. 30 compressions. 2 rescue breaths. Repeat. She pinched his nose, opened his mouth, gave 2 full breaths. Then back to compressions. 30 to 2, 30, 2. Her knees scraped against the pavement. Her palms burned from friction. Her hair clung to her face as sweat poured under the winter sky. A woman nearby yelled something. Another person pulled out their phone and started recording. A man leaned out his truck window. "What the hell are you doing?" Julia didn't stop. She had one goal: keep blood flowing until help arrived. 5 minutes passed. Sirens. A police cruiser and ambulance pulled up, lights flashing. An officer, maybe early 30s, approached quickly. Hand near his holster. "Step away from him, ma'am. Hands where I can see them." Julia raised her hands, breathless. "I'm a nurse." He collapsed. "I was giving CPR." "ID?" he barked. I don't work at a hospital anymore. I was laid off this morning." She said it like a confession. A paramedic kneeled beside the man, checked his vitals, then looked at the officer. "She kept him alive. Pulse is weak but present." Still, the officer didn't relax. He turned to a man holding a phone nearby. "You saw this happen?" "Yeah. She was real close when he went down. Looked like they were talking or something." Another bystander chimed in, holding up their phone. "I got it on video. Not sure what happened, but she was right there." Julia's heart sank. "I saved him. But that's not what they see. They see a woman without a badge. Alone. Unemployed. And that makes me dangerous." They asked her to come to the station for questioning. No handcuffs, but it felt worse. Inside the patrol car, Julia sat stiffly, hands folded, wrists red. No one offered water. No one said thank you. As they pulled away, she glanced out the window. The man, still unconscious, was being lifted onto a stretcher. His face was pale. His eyes closed. And she still didn't know his name. The police let her go just after midnight. No charges. No apology. Just a stiff nod and the kind of silence that clung like a stain. Julia Harper walked out of the precinct with no car, no phone signal, and no place to go. Her Corolla had been towed for parking on the shoulder. Her phone was at 2%, and the room she rented? Already locked up. Her landlord had packed her things in black trash bags and left them outside. Like they were no longer part of her. She had one option. The 24-hour public library on 5th and Bay. It was quiet there. Warm. A place no one asked questions if you didn't talk too much or smell too strong. Julia sat at the far end of the second floor, near an outlet and a vending machine. Her backpack was tucked under her legs, her coat wrapped tight. She hadn't slept in 30 hours, but her mind was wide awake. What if he dies? What if the news twists this? What if the video goes viral, without the part where I saved him? She leaned her head against the cold metal frame of the window. Her chest ached, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. The feeling that doing the right thing no longer mattered in the world she lived in. Somewhere behind her, the TV on the library wall buzzed faintly. No one was watching it. But one sentence broke through the static like thunder in a funeral. A retired 4-star general was hospitalized after collapsing on I-805 earlier today. Authorities confirmed that his life was saved by a good Samaritan whose identity remains unknown. Julia sat up. Her heartbeat kicked. The man, General Marcus Harlan, is currently in stable condition at the San Diego Military Medical Center. He is best known for leading the Joint Medical Command during overseas operations and for overseeing military medical reform after the 2020 surge. The name slammed into her like a brick to the chest. General Marcus Harlan. She knew that name. Everyone in healthcare did. The man who restructured battlefield medicine. The one who had fought Congress to secure mental health care for combat medics. He was a legend. A ghost. A walking page of history. And now, she realized with a sharp breath, she had kept that man alive with her bare hands. On a highway. With no recognition. And now, he was in a hospital. And she was, sleeping in a library. She opened her phone. No texts. No emails. Battery at 1%. She whispered to herself, there's no way he even knows it was me. Then, ping. A single message popped up. From, Director at SDMMC. Mill. Subject, urgent, for Julia Harper. She tapped it open with trembling fingers. Miss Harper. My name is General Marcus Harlan. I am writing from my hospital bed. I do not remember your face. But I remember your hands. The EMTs told me someone performed CPR and kept me alive until they arrived. I believe that person is you. Please come to San Diego Military Medical Center. Ask for me directly. MH. Julia stared at the screen. The library around her faded. The room. The vending machine hum. The whisper of old newspapers being turned. It all disappeared. One sentence echoed in her skull like a drumbeat. I remember your hands. She didn't feel proud. She didn't feel rescued. She felt seen. And after everything she had just been through, that was enough to make her cry. Julia stood in front of the glass doors of the San Diego Military Medical Center. Her reflection staring back with tired eyes and a pale face. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. Her blouse was wrinkled from sleeping upright in a library chair. And the scuff marks on her shoes told a quiet story of everywhere she had been forced to go alone. But the receptionist at the front desk didn't ask questions. She looked at Julia's ID. Glanced at her screen, and said. You're expected. 12th floor. East Wing. Room 1203. Julia blinked. Expected? A junior officer, no older than her, appeared moments later, uniform pressed sharp. Voice polite but firm. Right this way, Miss Harper. General Harlan asked for you personally. The elevator ride was silent. When the doors opened, the air changed. No longer the noise of busy wards. This floor was quieter. Brighter. Lined with portraits of decorated military medics, gold lettering beneath their names. And polished floors that carried no footprints. The officer opened the door to room 1203 and stepped aside. Inside, sunlight spilled over a man seated in a recliner by the window. Marcus Harlan. He wasn't in uniform now, just a loose hospital gown, a blanket over his knees, and a nasal cannula giving him supplemental oxygen. He looked older than she expected. Thinner. But not fragile. He looked up. And for the first time in days, someone looked at Julia Harper like she wasn't broken. "Miss Harper," he said, voice gravelly but sure. "I'm honored." Julia swallowed. "Sir. He held up a hand, motioned gently for her to sit. She did. Perched on the edge of the armchair like someone afraid to sink too far in. There was a pause. Not tense, but full. Then he spoke again. "I don't remember much. The collapse. A glimpse of sky. But I remember something odd. I remember feeling two hands on my chest. Not just medical. Intentional. Brave. And angry, not at me. At the idea of losing." Julia's eyes welled. She hadn't meant to cry, not here, not in front of him. But something about his words cracked through everything she had been holding in. "I didn't know who you were," she whispered. "I'm glad," he said. "It means you didn't save a name. You saved a life." He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a file. Thick. Official. He slid it across to her. "This is a contract. Clinical Operations Manager. Leadership role. Full benefits. Housing assistance, covered under our Veteran Medical Support Program. And, there's a scholarship option. If you ever want to go further, management, public health. Policy, whatever you choose." Julia stared at the folder. Then back at him. "Why are you doing this?" His eyes held hers. "Because the system almost broke you. And I built part of that system. But I also believe this. When we find someone like you, who did the right thing while the world looked away, we don't just offer help. We rebuild with them." Julia stepped out of that room an hour later, not with a job, but with dignity restored. For the first time in months, she felt solid under her own feet. She hadn't begged. Hadn't explained. Hadn't asked for anything. She had been seen. And she had been chosen. It had been 84 days since Julia Harper stepped into her new life. Her badge no longer said, Contract RN. It read, Julia Harper. Clinical Operations Manager, SD Military Medical Center. She now walked the same polished halls where generals were treated, where combat medics recovered. And where soldiers with scars visible and invisible passed by in wheelchairs, on crutches, or just in silence. But Julia didn't just walk. She listened. She noticed. And people noticed her. She wasn't the nurse who got laid off anymore. She was the one who had been in the right place, at the hardest moment, and had made the hardest choice, to act. Room 314B was her final stop that day. Sergeant Benjamin Cross, 33 years old. IED blast. Lost his leg. Refused rehab. Spoke only when necessary. The nurses called him, the wall. Julia knocked once and walked in. He was staring at the ceiling, jaw clenched, for dripping beside him untouched. You're wasting perfectly good morphine, she said. Her tone just light enough to not be a threat. He didn't move. Julia sat. I read your file, she said. But files are liars. You were leading a convoy outside Kandahar, right? Still silence. You know, she added after a moment, 3 months ago, I was sitting in a police station. No shoes. No lawyer. No clue what had just happened. That got him. His brow furrowed. I had just saved a man's life. Right there on the freeway. Did CPR with no gloves, no equipment. Just instinct. Kept him alive until the ambulance came. Ben turned his head, slightly. And then, Julia continued, someone said they saw me too close. The cops thought I might have been involved in harming him. He stared at her now, blinking. I was almost arrested for doing the one thing I've always done. Help. Even when it costs me. Silence. Then. What happened? He asked, voice hoarse. Julia smiled faintly. The man I saved turned out to be someone important. He gave me a job. He gave me a second chance. But that's not why I tell you this. Then why? He asked. Because I think you're still lying here waiting for someone to remind you your story isn't over. She stood slowly, gathering her tablet. And I'm here to tell you, it's not. Weeks passed. Sergeant Cross began rehab. Slowly. Grudgingly. But Julia saw the change, the slight nods when she walked in. The way he let younger soldiers push his wheelchair. The one time he said, thanks. Without being asked. Something in him had shifted. And she knew why. Because when the world makes you feel like a burden, sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to let you disappear. Late one evening, as Julia locked up her office, she paused by a new hallway installation, a photo wall for staff and volunteers who had gone above and beyond. In the middle, in black and white, was a still frame. A woman kneeling beside a man in the middle of a freeway. Hands pressed to his chest. Face set with determination and fear. Just barely visible in the background, a line of cars driving past. Below it, engraved in metal. She didn't know who he was. She just knew he needed to live. And so she made sure he did. Julia exhaled softly, her reflection caught in the glass. She didn't need applause. She didn't need medals. All she needed was to know that in a world that looked away, she didn't.